Cool. Hello, everybody. How are you? There we go.
Welcome everyone to our webinar today. So we're excited. I'm joined by Paul, who will be joining us to talk, as he always does, as the expert in the field, about migrating to New Zealand. So Paul, maybe you can start us off by formally introducing yourself.
Yeah, my name's Paul Goddard, and I'm a licensed immigration advisor for New Zealand. Lived in New Zealand for over 17 years, and between myself and Nazim, I think we've probably helped tens of thousands of people move to New Zealand and Australia, because as a company, we do help people move to both countries. So I'm looking forward to having this chat and running through things and comparing the two countries and systems that they've got in place.
Thanks, Paul. And for anybody who doesn't know who I am, my name's Nassim. You might be able to tell from my accent that it's a mix between Australia and New Zealand. Grew up in Australia, call New Zealand home. I'm a licensed immigration advisor, registered migration agent, and I'm based here in our offices in Auckland. So I'll be able to answer some of the questions that we also find people are asking when they're trying to decide whether they move to Australia or New Zealand. Because, I mean, we were chatting earlier before everyone joined us and we went live about the weather, and I was saying it was cold because it was going to be 17 degrees. Paul's just told me that that's summer over for you guys in the UK.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is just go through what the different countries require if you're looking to migrate. We do appreciate that a lot of times people just want to move and they're not 100% sure about which location. So what we'll do is we'll go through the New Zealand visa requirements compared to the Australian ones. We'll talk a little bit about the job search process and how it's different or similar in both countries. And then particularly why networking and building connections happens to be easier in New Zealand. So Paul will take the lead on that and I'll just add a bit as well. We'll talk about the work-life balance in New Zealand and Australia and which climate is really better. So we won't get into which rugby team's better or which cricket team's better, but we'll stick with the main topics that we've decided we're going to help address today.
Absolutely. Yeah, we won't get into rugby at all. So that sounds good. So yeah,
so why don't we just kick off? So I guess what we'll do is we'll really, really quickly go over what the visa requirements are, because if you're looking for a move to either Australia or New Zealand, a visa is obviously going to be a big part of that process. Any country that you go to does have some sort of visa or immigration process or requirement. So we've got up on the screen that New Zealand always requires a job offer. This is obviously for more permanent migration. Coming for a holiday, you don't need a job offer, but this is if you're looking to move. You must be under 56 years of age for New Zealand. So you've got quite some time to build your career, have your family, and then make the move to New Zealand. You need to be able to meet the health and character requirements, and you can include eligible family members to join you here in New Zealand as well. Australia is a little bit different in that the job offer is not normally required, but it can be in some visa types. You must be under 45 years of age, so you do need to be about a decade younger. So if you are looking to move, you need to sort of hustle. Again, you need to meet the health and character requirements and include eligible family members. So they're quite similar, but there's little distinctions. And so depending on on your personal circumstances, the right option might vary.
Yeah, and I guess Nazim as well, as we know, some people might be 44, 45 years old, kind of rules Australia out for them in a lot of ways. Doesn't mean that you can't move to New Zealand, and both countries can open up the other country as well, can't they? So they can be used that way. So there's usually always a way forward if you're open to moving to either place.
I think that's what I'm saying. That's a really, really good point, is that it's always important to remember that even if you're interested in one country, it doesn't mean that the other country can't help be a pathway to that move. We always hear a lot about how people come to New Zealand first and then maybe after 10, 15 years make the move to Australia. That's a normal process for people. I like to think it's because we're helping people acclimatize to the warmer weather before they move, but it can be because of visa requirements as well.
Yeah, yeah, but it's
So
great.
there is always options, and it's really, really important that you're finding out what the options are for you and your family, and what you can and can't achieve, and what you need to do to get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess the thing that was listed as number one was the difference in terms of the job search process. So I'll let Paul talk to this because I think he's
Yeah.
got really, really good experience and insights in how
Yeah,
small New Zealand can be.
yeah. I think the first thing to note on this is, as Nazim said before, a lot of you who might be eligible for Australia might be able to get a visa for Australia without the need to get a job offer, which is great. But of course, you'll probably still want a job when you get there. So even though you might not need it to get the visa for Australia, it's there. For New Zealand, though, pretty much everybody who wants to move to New Zealand moves as a skilled migrant, which means they need a job offer to get a visa. And both countries have different things. So there's what we call the hidden job market. Every country in the world has a hidden job market, and what that means is quite simple. It's the roles that are available that aren't on the internet. They're hidden. They're word of mouth. They're in the employer's head. They might be further down the line, etc. And the hidden job market in New Zealand is quite easy to access because New Zealand's fairly small. There's only 5 million people. It's pretty easy to get on Google and find employers that you want to work for, regardless of if they've got jobs advertised or not, or anything else. So New Zealand's a little bit easier to tap into that way. That's actually gone really small now. I can't read the next bit. What's the next section, Nazim? That's the second line
So it
there for
says
me.
New Zealand has a job offer based system which is less complex than
I've
Australia.
already covered that. I've already covered that. And so
Oh, the employer accreditation.
employer accreditation, that's what I was going to get onto. So
So just really quickly, I think it just highlights, Paul, that you and I are getting too old to migrate because we can't
can't
see.
read. Yeah, that's what it is. You have to have good eyesight to move to New Zealand or Australia. So New Zealand has this new accreditation system, where basically every single employer in New Zealand has to be accredited to be able to offer a job to someone from offshore. In other words, only accredited employers can offer jobs to people from overseas. And so there's employers in New Zealand who are accredited, there's employers in New Zealand who aren't. The good thing with the accreditation system is it's there to protect you. So the employer's being pre-checked before they offer you a role, which is great. Also, it's actually not too expensive for the employer to get accredited. If they've got the help and support of people like us who can help them get accredited, then the process can actually be fairly quick and not too painful. So even employers that aren't currently accredited can look at getting accredited if they want to offer you a role. So there is a lot of scope there. There are tens of thousands of employers in New Zealand who are accredited, and there are lots more who are becoming accredited or willing to become accredited. So that's a bit more of an advantage. Also, New Zealand doesn't have states like Australia. So those of you who've done any research will know Australia has different states, and different states have different rules. Whereas in New Zealand, it's one rule for the whole country. So, that can make things a bit easier and a bit easier to network. The employers in Australia, that section, Nazim, the last 2 points.
Yeah. Look, employers in Australia need to sponsor you for
Yeah.
your visa in Australia, and that's quite different to the process that Paul's just outlined. They're supporting you, they do their bit, and then you go off and you do your own. But in Australia, it's more of an actual sponsorship. And I guess that last point is just about how casual New Zealand is versus Australia when you're applying for a job. And I think you can
Yeah,
attest to
there's
that, Paul.
there's there's Aussie laid back, and then there's New Zealand laid back, isn't there? And New Zealanders tend to be a little bit more laid back than the Aussies in a lot of things that they do. I think it's important though that people often get mixed up with accreditation and sponsorship. People often say, "Just can you get me an employer to sponsor me in New Zealand?" It's like, well, no, because there isn't employer sponsorship in New Zealand. There's accreditation, and they are very different things. I think the other key thing to note here, though, when it comes to job search is New Zealand and Australia do have skill shortages. Both countries are now open after the pandemic. Everybody's fighting to get skilled people. There are lots and lots of shortages around. It doesn't mean that it's going to be quick and easy, because for most people it's not. But there's never been a better time to start thinking about or actually start making the move. We're helping more and more people all the time. More and more people are getting job offers now that the borders are all open. So if you really want to do this, then we're happy to help. So we'll go on to the next section, which is something that we just touched on, Nazim, which is around the difference with the countries.
Look, it is significantly smaller, and we joke about how you can't be mean to anyone in New Zealand because someone else will know that person and it'll come back to you. We've got a mobile phone company in New Zealand called 2 Degrees, and it's because we've got 2 degrees of separation in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Now, a little bit earlier, we talked about that, the hidden job market. I think that was on one of the earlier slides that we shared, Paul, and I can attest to that. I got my job at Working In because a friend of a friend was working in and was like, oh, we're looking for some new lawyers to join the team. And then they were like, oh, I know someone. And that's how I started working here 12 years ago. So I think that's a really, really good example of why connecting with, friends that have moved, ex-colleagues that have moved, anyone that you know that's moved to New Zealand will be part of your network to help you with your move and your journey to New Zealand, and in particular, to help you access the jobs in the hidden market. Yeah. Australia is, we can see it visually on the screen, is significantly bigger. You've got different states operate slightly different ways, like all parts of the world. A slightly different region will have a slightly different, approach and culture. There's a lot more people that you need to know in Australia to be able to access the hidden jobs market. Doesn't mean it's impossible. It's just, in terms of scale, you just need to be considering how many more people do you know in Australia that might be able to, let you know about a job that's available, or, let the hiring manager or their boss know that, oh, I've got a friend who's great for this job and I'm going to get them to apply for that role online. So keep an eye out for it. So it's a lot harder. I grew up in Sydney, New South Wales, in a very, very small part, and I only really know people in that small bubble. Whereas I've been in New Zealand and I constantly run into people now who know my husband, know my in-laws, know friends of friends. It is actually quite lovely to feel like you're living in a village city, if that makes sense. I don't know how else to describe it.
The big little city, as they call Auckland. And I think it's true as well. You look at Perth. Perth's the most isolated city in the world, So if you're in Perth, you're in Perth. It's thousands of miles to the next big city, and so you're absolutely right. Making connections is crucial to getting a job offer. We see that all the time, and we do provide employment support to guide people on how to do this, but it is crucial, and it's a little bit different, I think. But I think the other thing that most people will be here for, Nazim, on this webinar is this next slide, work-life balance. It's why lifestyle is the number one reason people make the move. So I think, what's your thoughts? Obviously you've lived in Australia, I've lived in New Zealand. What's your thoughts on the Aussie lifestyle, and maybe compared to the New Zealand lifestyle, because you've done both?
Yeah, so obviously I lived in Sydney, grew up in Sydney in the western suburbs. I live in Western Auckland now, obviously like the West. Look, the lifestyle in New Zealand is definitely more relaxed, or at least that's my experience. And I think it has to do with the fact that I went from one city to another, and I guess the vibe is the word we use these days, or the culture or the feeling is a lot more relaxed in New Zealand. There's a she'll be right attitude in both countries, but New Zealanders take it to another level. And so I think that general feeling of the way that you behave and the way that you look towards life means that you work hard and you play hard, and that, relaxing is a really, really big thing in New Zealand. I mean, up on the screen, we've got pictures of colleagues who, will spend the weekends or any public holidays or just take a day off, annual leave because the weather might be nice to go and, enjoy the water. In New Zealand, we're surrounded by water, by parks, by, trails, all of these outdoor facilities, which we know that are free, and it's just amazing for people to be able to access. So one thing that I learned when I first moved to New Zealand is that every family has something called a batch, and it's a little shack somewhere that you go to on the weekends just to be able to relax, because the relaxation part of your life and your day-to-day is really, really important. So I think that was something that I found was even more important in New Zealand versus Australia, that balance. We talk about, we're talking very, very seriously in New Zealand about a 4-day week, because we want to make sure that people are getting the break that they need to enjoy their families, the outdoors, and all of that kind of stuff. So I think, although we also have it in Australia, and everyone loves the beach after work and all the rest of it, it was a little bit more hustle bustle, and I think it's because it's a bigger cities, bigger country, and so you have a lot more of that automatic feel that you need to be pushing a little bit harder in the
Totally get
rat
it.
race.
I think one of the things
It's
that always amazed me as well is, like I say, touching on that size of Australia, the distance between the cities in Australia compared to the distance between the cities in New Zealand. In New Zealand, you get in the car, 40 minutes later, you're in the next town. In Australia, you can drive for hours and hours and hours just to get to the next city. It's a bit more like America in that way. I found different sort of feel, isn't there, around the country. But I do think that both countries, I mean, there's no doubt both countries offer amazing lifestyles. you know it's arguable that there isn't one better than the other. They're both great. It's just they're just slightly different to each other. And and I think that leads on to this next one, which we won't get into arguments about, Nazim, but it's about comparing climates between the two countries, because this comes up. You and I have done webinars and seminars and things all over the world, and people say, oh yeah, but doesn't it rain all the time in New Zealand, and isn't it sunny all the time in Australia? But there's a reality, isn't there? I mean, what's your thoughts on the different climates?
So Australia's massive, it's humongous. So depending on where you are in Australia, the weather's actually quite different.
Mm.
So if you're in the Northern Territory, it's always you're hot. You're near the equator, it's hot, it's humid, you know. It's a totally different experience to if you decide to live in Tasmania, where it's more temperate climate. It's a lot like New Zealand, where you have sunshine, you have rain, and then you have like cool, crisp winters. But still not really snow, because it's not that cold.
Yeah.
And so it really does depend on where in the country in Australia you're going, whereas New Zealand, the weather's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Because it's small enough that the weather's just always not too hot, not too cold. We do hear that it rains all the time, but I actually don't think it actually rains as much as we think. I think there's this perception, but it helps keep the grass green. But no, it doesn't actually rain all the time.
No, I think the thing with rain,
maybe I just don't notice it. I don't know.
No, I think the thing with the rain in New Zealand, I guess, again, I'm just comparing with the UK. In the UK, you get these days that are grey and miserable, and there'll be a lot of them, especially around winter. Winter's winter, in a place like the UK. Whereas winter in New Zealand it's a little bit cooler, but it could be 13 degrees, something like that, for 12, 13 degrees in the winter, 27 degrees in the summer, not too hot, not too cold. Summers in New Zealand tend to be longer than, say, people coming from the UK, etc. You actually get a decent summer in New Zealand that can last for months. But I think both countries do as well have their own elements of extremities, and the whole world's seeing this now. But I would say overall, Australia's probably a little bit more extreme, where you can get some really, really hot temperatures, whereas New Zealand doesn't really go to the extremes. But I think New Zealand's green and everything else, and that says it. A lot of rain. Well, I say a lot of rain, decent amount of rain, but a lot of sunshine. That's why New Zealand's so green, and why big patches of Australia aren't so green. But again, I think you're right there, Nazim. Picking where you go, especially in Australia, look at the climate, because Northern Territory, a hell of a lot different to Sydney, and Melbourne's on a similar latitude to Auckland. So Melbourne and Auckland can have similar weather, although Melbourne tends to be slightly hotter. But climate's important. But I think the point I would make with the climate is you do get a lot of sunshine in both countries, and sunshine makes a hell of a lot of difference to people's happiness,
Absolutely.
and that's another reason for people to making the move. So we'll get on now to the next bit, which is, anyone on here watching, how do you do this? Um, the first step with us is very simple. You can see it on the screen. Do a free assessment. Now, we do help people. I know it says New Zealand there. We do help people move to New Zealand and Australia. Okay, so if you want to move to Australia, you can still fill out the appraisal. And if it says Australia, we'll send you a link to go on and get an assessment for Australia if you look any good. And what I mean by that is we will look at your details and see if you meet the basic criteria. And then if you do, then what we'll do is we'll actually send you the option to have a full assessment with us. And that full assessment is completed by a licensed immigration advisor for New Zealand or by a MARA agent for Australia. And what that is us getting all the details we need from you as a person or as a family or whatever it might be, CVs, etc., all the details about you, comparing it with current immigration policy for either country, and then putting a report together that basically explains what your options are, what visas you're eligible for, etc. That will also result in having a consultation with one of our advisors or team, where we will, in that consultation, go through everything you need to know. The aim is that by the end of that consultation, you've got all the answers to all your questions and you've got a clear way forward. Because it's only by having all the answers to all your questions and a clear way forward that you can actually make decisions and move forward. This is why the assessments that we do are so important. It's not just telling you that you're eligible for a visa. That's great and it's important, but it's actually showing you the way forward. Once you are eligible for you, how is this going to work? What do you need to do to make this work? And that's what we do. And anything to add to that, Nazim, with the assessments and how that works?
Yeah, look, I think it's really, really important for people to understand that when you're migrating to another country, there's a lot involved. Now, we've obviously just gone through the process for New Zealand. If you are looking to move, if you don't know what you don't know, you can't actually get prepared. And I think that's actually quite crucial. So when you're looking to migrate and say, for example, you think New Zealand is the way to go, we can check all your information. We can see what is or isn't going to be possible. We can then give you the details to get prepared. So, I mean, comparing Australia to New Zealand, we know that in New Zealand, you need to meet some criteria, and then based on that, you'll be able to apply for a particular type of visa. Knowing that means that you can approach employers in the right way, with the right attitude, and, present yourself, in a way that's going to get you the best outcome. I get lots of direct messages and emails saying, I really want to move. How do I get a job? And I was like, well, what do you do? Do you know if you qualify? Do we need to get your qualification assessed so that you do qualify? There's a whole lot to be considered. If you're thinking about Australia, you need to know even more, because depending on your occupation, you need to do potentially twice as much stuff to prepare, even before you start talking to employers, because you might have an occupation that requires a skills assessment. That's an extra several $1,000s just in government fees. And currently, because the Australian government's playing catch up, 16, 17 weeks before you get your outcome. And so knowing that means that you can prepare better, not just yourself, but if you're moving with family, it's really, really important to be considering them in your timeline and your process as well.
Totally. And it's what you don't know that trips you up. It doesn't matter how much research somebody does on the internet, it's the stuff that you miss that trips you up. And And I say this to people all the time. The internet isn't about you and your move. The internet is just pages of information. And if you're just using the internet to do your research, you're totally reliant on being on the right page at the right time with the right information. And that's almost impossible. So, that's why you use people like us. So I think in summary, I've just noticed our slides have got a bit blurry. So I won't put the last slide up because I don't think anyone can read it. But basically, there's 4 steps that we. Ah, it is. Okay, thanks, Theo. That's our technical guy there, Theo. So it's just blurry for us. There are 4 steps in making a move to New Zealand, and they are very simple to understand. Get ready, get a job, get a visa, get on a plane. Slightly different for Australia. It might be get ready, get a visa, get on a plane. You might miss the get a job offer, or that might be at the end once you're in Australia. But these are the steps that we take people through, especially for New Zealand, and it's very important that it's done in that way, in that order. If you're not ready, you're not going to get a job offer. If you don't get a job offer, you're not going to get to step 3, which is the visa. And if you don't have a visa, you're not getting on a plane. A lot of people jump to step 2 without doing step 1. They think that they're ready to move because they've been on the internet or they've visited Australia or New Zealand. They're not ready to move. You're not ready to move until you're information ready, document ready, and able to prove to employers that you're ready. And if you're not at that point, then you're not ready. And that's why most people doing this on their own are not ready. And it's really important. But the first thing before we do any of that, before you even commit to making a move fully, get an assessment done, get a free appraisal done, cost you nothing, fill out the free form. Let's get your details. Let's see if you can do this. Then if that looks good, move on and have a full assessment with us with a report and a consultation, then make decisions, as to what you move forward. That really is the message. We've got a massive team of people. I say massive, it is massive now. It seems to be getting bigger all the time. We've helped tens of thousands of people move to New Zealand for years and years and years. You can see some of our team there. So, the other message there is an obvious one.
That's the visa team.
Yeah, just the visa team.
This is the Auckland-based visa team. It's not even all of the visa team.
No, just the Auckland bit. You're in safe hands because we're a large team. It means that we do have a big depth of knowledge. It means we have lots of connections, especially with the immigration departments and stuff, because we're in touch with them all the time. But also we do it, I think we're very much well, we are. It's not, I think we are very focused on the client journey, the customer experience, the customer journey. Even though we're a big team, you're not just a number when you do this. We understand that you are changing your life because we've all done that as well. So we know what it's like. Most of the team working in have moved to New Zealand from somewhere else, from all over the world. And so we understand it and we get it. And that's really important. So that's it, Nazim. I think we've got there. Is there anything that you want to add?
I've just been looking at some of the comments that were
cool, yeah.
online, asking about, health conditions and stuff. So not all health conditions will automatically disqualify you as being eligible to migrate. That's part of why it's really, really important for us to do that full assessment. And as part of it, you need to provide as much information as possible about your condition, the medications you take, how long you've had it, the prognosis, all of that stuff allows us to then go through the immigration instructions, look at the notes, refer back to our, vast years of knowledge, consult with our team members to come back and say, look, this is going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Or we think it'll be okay, but it might be a little bit bumpy along the way. Are you prepared for that process and the extra steps? Or in some instances, but actually quite rarely, thankfully, we say, actually, it's not going to work. We don't recommend the investment.
Yeah.
Maybe put your energy and fund somewhere else.
It's a great point, Nazim. We'd love to offer help to everyone who wants to move to New Zealand or Australia, but we can only help people where we can genuinely add benefit. There's always risk involved in emigrating. And I often say this, yes, we do visas and yes, we do these things, but actually what we do is we minimize people's risks and we maximize their opportunities, because that's what you need to do to move forward, and it's all about that. It's all about going through every step of the way. So I think any other questions that have popped up there, Nazim, in the chat that, need answering?
There was a question about, do we help with jobs? We're not employers. We're not the employer. We work with a lot of companies, but we can guide you, but you will still have to apply for the job. You're the candidate. You need to sell yourself. You know what you do.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, really important for people to understand that we can provide assistance and guidance, but we're not a recruiter in the traditional sense that's going to go around banging on doors trying to get a job for you.
No.
What we do is help you be in the best possible position by having the knowledge, having the tools, so that when you're applying for jobs, you've got the best chance of success.
Absolutely. I mean, I deal with this, as you know, on a daily basis, what we call employment support. And employment support is exactly that. It's support. You know, the people watching this tonight, you're the expert in what you do. You know, the employer wants to talk to you about what you do, not talk to us about what you do. But what we do is put you in the best position to do it, show you how to do it, and wherever possible, follow up and advocate on your behalf as well to remove any questions or doubts that the employer might have. It's not just about minimizing risks for you, it's about minimizing risks for the employers. Employers want certainty that that person is going to get a visa, and we can do that with an employer. We can say to an employer, look, yeah, this person's great. They're working with us and everything's good. Quite often that's what's needed. We provide a letter of support for people looking to move to New Zealand, which tells the employer these things. And you were telling me the other day, Nazim, that one of the most common pieces of feedback we get from employers who've offered jobs to our clients is if there wasn't the letter of support or if we weren't helping that person with a visa, there's no way that they'd have even looked at it, because employers are getting bombarded with CVs from all over the world. And most of the time they're just hitting the delete button because your CV on its own does not tell the employer what they need to know. Okay. And I think that's a really important message for anyone who is looking for that. You see it online all the time going, oh, help me. I'm interested. I want a job. That's not how you get a job. You've got to be focused. You've got to know what you're doing, but you've got to be prepared to put the work in. No one's going to magic a job for you out of thin air while you sit back. You've got to be prepared to put the work in, and we can show you how to do that.
And I'll just add to that. So obviously, me and my team, we work a lot with the employers. They've found the perfect person. Obviously, they're a migrant, which is why we're involved. And we're going through the visa application process. We're getting the job checks. And there's a lot of work available in New Zealand. I did see if there was a question about, there's lots of work. New Zealand is different to Australia in that anyone and any role can get a visa. Whereas in Australia, you have to only be certain occupations. So there's a huge need for skills in New Zealand, and there's lots of jobs online, and the only people applying are people from overseas, but they're not doing it very well. So, basic things like making sure that your CV and cover letter and your letter of support is all tailored to the role. That, basic stuff like that. You're selling yourself. You're fighting with, at the moment, the rest of the world's population. We were with an employer yesterday who said that, they put an ad up, they get 0 New Zealand applicants, but they got 300 and something offshore applicants, and all of the CVs were terrible, or they were badly written, or it was just one line, so don't do yourself a disservice. Do it properly, and then you've got a better chance of success.
Yeah, I would say even...
And, employers are more than happy to support even roles that you would think, oh, is New Zealand hiring, will they support someone on a visa for that role? You'd be surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say that even probably 80% or more of the CVs that we get emailed are terrible. The skills of the person aren't terrible, but the CV just isn't going to get them a job ever, and
you can't find it.
basic mistakes that people make, and you need to be doing a lot more than just firing off a CV. So I think that's a key piece of advice there for everyone. So in summary, guys, there is a link to do a free appraisal. We will be emailing you all after this webinar in the next coming days. We'll send you the links to do a free appraisal. If you're interested in moving to either country, fill out the appraisal form, give us your details. It costs you nothing. It'll take you a few minutes, and it could change your life ultimately. But cheers, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. See you. Bye.